Time to start. Thanks everybody for waiting. 12:03. We will get started now. So before we jump in, today we're going to talk about OwnCloud and Jive, and we're going to show you how we have extended Jive using the Jive APIs. We've extended Jive with file sync and share. Before we do that, let me ask a question to everybody here. Just asking a polling question as to where you are with Jive. Are you currently using Jive? Do you plan to implement it in the next 6 months, or really, no plans to use Jive at this point? So let that go for a minute. Interesting. Interesting to see that. Okay. A couple of actually, that's it on the housekeeping. There is a chat area down there where we're tracking that, and also any questions you might have. So as we go through this presentation, please feel free to ask questions, and if we have a minute, we'll stop and take a question there, or perhaps we'll get to it by the end. And if we don't get to your question specifically, we will reach out to you after the webinar and connect with you to answer it then. Okay. Looks like 2/3 voted. Okay, so a lot of it looks like the majority of you at this point plan to implement Jive in the next 6 months. So that's interesting. Okay, so then you must be well aware of Jive. Jive being essentially an enterprise social platform, kind of like Facebook for the enterprise is a good way to think about it. And one of the things you do inside Jive is occasionally you'll put files into a conversation with somebody so that you can share the latest documents. And that's really where OwnCloud comes in. But before going into the integration we put together, let's talk quickly about the Dropbox problem in OwnCloud. It's really very simple. If you're interested in file sync and share, chances are you have a Dropbox problem of some kind. A couple of users in the enterprise, user A and user B, they wanted to email a document, but it might have been too big for email. And so to share it, they went to an external cloud service. It could have been Dropbox, and it could have been Google Docs or something else. And now that file is sitting outside your firewall, and yes, they've been able to share and get on with the day, but now it's well outside of your control. Very little security around it, very little governance over it, especially around things like user provisioning, storage and server administration, access, etc. And in many cases, you see sensitive data and information leaking outside of the enterprise. So that's the Dropbox problem. And what do we do? Well, OwnCloud is a piece of software that helps enterprises who care about this sensitive data leakage via Dropbox or other cloud service deliver the secure file sync and share solution. There are really three things that stand out when looking at OwnCloud. One, it's completely on site or wherever you choose to put it. It can be running on in your data center on your servers. It could be perhaps running on your private virtual private cloud. It's entirely up to you where you put it. It is yours to do with what you want. We provide and support the software only. Two, it's integrated in with your infrastructure. Everything from databases and storage up through authentication mechanisms to other front-end systems like virus scanning. And it is also, finally, extensible through APIs and plugins. And what we're going to show you today is an example of how you can take the OwnCloud APIs and very quickly integrate it with your infrastructure, and if it doesn't exist, even extend it to integrate with your infrastructure in ways that nobody else can match. And all of that provided with the same seamless, easy-to-use end-user experience that comes from those consumer-grade services like Dropbox. Because let's face it, if your users aren't satisfied with that experience, they are not going to be switching to you from something like Dropbox or Google Drive or something like that. Okay, so how do we solve this problem? Well, whereas before the firewall was on the left, the firewall is now on the right, and we've essentially put this cloud, the OwnCloud server, running inside your infrastructure, inside the data center that you choose, essentially managed by you, your storage and servers, your user provisioning and deprovisioning, your IT security policies, your governance, your management, your admins, entirely administered by you. And now those same documents, that same problem of sharing documents that are too big for email, for example, can now be solved by an internal system that you can monitor, track, manage, audit and deliver securely those files between those end users, and still getting that same same grade, consumer grade ease of use that goes with that your end users are expecting. So, what are we going to talk about today? Well, if we have OwnCloud on the left, and there's an OwnCloud server running in the middle, and we have desktop sync clients, and we have iOS and Android clients, and we have Jive. And essentially what we've done is we've made it possible for files to be stored in Jive over on the right, but for them to appear as if they're part of OwnCloud and then distribute them automatically to desktops or make them available to mobile devices on demand. But talking about that is not as cool as showing it, so I'm going to switch over to a virtual machine now, and I'm going to show you what we've done. So to reorient you, we're now looking at Jive. This is Jive On, which is Jive's cloud-based solution running Jive 7, and this is the instance for OwnCloud. And I'm just a user, and I'm poking around doing my thing, and clearly I haven't been doing much but testing and integrating and playing with photos. But what I do for this demo is I'm going to go to Places, and I'm going to go to places where I'm a group member. And what you'll see here is there are 5 groups. All right. Those 5 groups are represented in OwnCloud by 5 folders. So you'll notice that there's a bunch of files and folders. We've got Matt's folder, we've got the group created on the fly, we've got the Jive World discussion, we've got Matt's place, and we've got Matt's test group. And the members that I'm a group of will appear, with the exception of Matt's test group, they'll appear, and we can talk about why that is, that with the exception of Matt's test group, they'll all appear in my desktop sync client. So, for example now, let's say on my desktop, all the files that are in Matt's folder, they all show up in the Matt's folder there, and all the files in group created on the fly show up in the files in the groups created on the fly. So in there I have a demo presentation. Here's a group created on the fly. I have a demo presentation. And Jive stores the files in these cases, and OwnCloud simply syncs them to the desktop and acts as a proxy. So there's the Jive server in the background. We have the OwnCloud server, which is right here. And this is representing of your Jive groups. Here's Jive, here are your Jive groups, and then here are all of your folders, and then inside the group created on the fly, oh wait, which one did I? Oh, there's a demo presentation. Naturally, with a live demo, what I'm going to do is create a new folder on the desktop, and I'm going to put some files in it. So here's a new folder. When you create a new folder on the desktop, it will create a new group in Jive. So I'm going to rename this, and it's going to be Jive Webinar. So let me show you how this works. Jive Webinar here. I have a sync client running in the background. The sync client just synchronized with the server that file. So now when I reload the OwnCloud web server that I'm looking at here, you should see the Jive Webinar folder should show up. And naturally, hold on a second. Make sure this is connected. Make sure that it's logged in as me. So in OwnCloud, when you connect with and log into the OwnCloud server, you then log into the Jive server with the same username and password, and your credentials are carried through. So for that reason here, what I'm going to do, since I seem to be having some connectivity challenges, I'm going to switch over to a video of this and run it that way as the backup plan. Okay. So that's interesting. There we go. So switching over to the video, since the live demo seems to be having some connectivity problems, I'm going to show you this instead. Here we are sitting in a desktop. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open on the desktop a file. It's just a file that's an example. And it's a PowerPoint presentation. And I'm going to publish this using the Jive plugin for Office. So I can push this to Jive. It's the equivalent of uploading this to Jive. So great, I've now force uploaded this to Jive. I'm going to show you the use case here where I sync this with a mobile device, and I work with it on a mobile device, and then I put it back into Jive. So I've now pushed this desktop into Jive, into this Jive plugin group, and there's the file integration OwnCloud Jive. I now switch over to the web instance of OwnCloud, and I click on that, and I have the same Jive plugin. When I go in there, integration OwnCloud Jive, there's the file. Now when I go to my mobile device, I can now see exactly the same representation of my groups with files within the group, and when I reload the app, or when I reload the directory, there is integration OwnCloud Jive. So I now open it with an external app on the mobile device. I edit that. So I'm going to add some text with an external app on the iOS. So imagine you got on an airplane, and the airplane, you're offline and you're working on this and you want to make some comments or changes. Well, here's some comments or changes. And what I do then is I put it back into OwnCloud using the Apple standard feature open in OwnCloud right there. So let me actually go back and show that to you real quick. Now I'm going to pause it here, and what I do here is I specify where in OwnCloud I want to put it. In this case, I want to put it into the Jive folder, and I want to use the Jive plugin folder, which is specifically the group that we're putting it in. Give it a name, and I upload it. Now, when I upload it, I'll get an overwrite. Uh-oh, this already exists. Well, yes, it already exists, but Jive versions all files. So I just say, go ahead and overwrite it. Jive will create a new version of the file. And there it goes. Give it a second, and whoop, it's gone. Now it's uploaded. And now what we can do in the app is we'll just delete this file from the device, just so that you can see it. In fact, we're going to download it again to the device just to show that the same file is there. There you go. With the edit OwnCloud mobile app in the bottom. And to show you how it looks on the back end of Jive, we have integration OwnCloud Jive. That's the file we're working with. And as you can see, it's now version 2, which is a minute ago, it was version 1. And it was versioned automatically. And that is how the app works. Essentially, in the use case of somebody taking an iPad, getting on an airplane, and using the app, the iPad, to edit a file, make changes, put it back as soon as they land. And there's an offline queuing function available in the mobile app, so you don't have to be connected. You can finish your editing, put it back into OwnCloud, and as soon as OwnCloud gets connected, say when you land, it'll push the files back up into Jive. And essentially, that's what we've done with the app. There is one other element to it, which is the desktop sync component. And for that, essentially, I will switch over to this. And what I'm showing you now is the desktop sync line of the app we were just looking at. So OwnCloud is syncing with Jive in the background. And I have my Jive folder, and here are all my groups, and inside my groups are my files. And what I can do, for example, and you'll watch this desktop client in the background automatically syncs all of this up to OwnCloud. I could take, I don't know, here's a demo presentation, and drop it into, I don't know, Matt's, the group created on the fly. And I'm going to, there's already a file there. So I'm going to take another demo and put it into group created on the fly. And as you'll notice on the right here, the sync app automatically identifies and uploads the file. Off it goes. Now if I go into group created on the fly, there's 2 presentations in there, and they've been pushed up to OwnCloud. But the other thing that I can do, you may have noticed, is that sometimes your Jive may have a limit on the size of files. So here's a folder called Too Big For, and that's what we decided to call it for the purposes of the demo. These are files that are too big for Jive. So what I can do is I can take a video, for example, that's too big for Jive, and I can drop it in there. You'll see on the right, OwnCloud identifies the change, uploads the file, And that's the connectivity problem we've been having. That doesn't just figure. So, bottom line is, we upload the file, and then we provide a link into Jive so that you can see that file. Okay. Let me switch back to the presentation. We'll continue on. Okay. So what do we do? In this demo, we connected Jive through OwnCloud to iOS and Android devices and desktop apps. So that means that I was able to log into the mobile device and see files inside OwnCloud, even though they still resided in Jive. I was able to download them, interact with them, and put them back. Also able to sync those same files from Jive down through to the desktop sync client. And the one thing that it's worth pointing out is that Jive is one form of what we call secondary storage in OwnCloud. So if you upload files and use OwnCloud as you want, you can store things on the OwnCloud server. But in the case of the Jive, what we did, we created a secondary storage location, and everything that's uploaded into that folder gets stored in Jive. Well, the same way we do that with Jive, we can also do that with Windows on the back end, and a number of other back-end systems, FTPS, object stores, whatever you might want from a secondary storage location. So you could think of OwnCloud and the Jive integration as an example of how to integrate in disparate file storage locations into one place that allows your users that same file sync and share experience, but connecting to all of their storage locations on the back end. And what OwnCloud does is it abstracts out that complexity and lets them worry about accessing and doing their job, while the back-end complexity is handled by OwnCloud and managed by IT. So really, just to close this one up very quickly, OwnCloud 5, the Enterprise Edition, fully on site. We talked about this, right? It's typically deployed next to Jive and connecting using the REST APIs to do this Jive integration. It's integrated with the customer infrastructure, i.e. Active Directory LDAP for authentication. It could be SAML for authentication, OAuth for authentication, or out of the box, it's basic auth. It's extensible through internal and external APIs. We just saw an example of the Jive API connecting off to the Jive server, all designed to provide that consumer-like end-user experience. So essentially what we've done is we provided you with the ability to extend your Jive experience, right? We connect with Jive to store user files. All those files remain in Jive. OwnCloud acts as a proxy and exposes them on mobile and desktop clients and allows you to take those files with you. Of course, take a look for more information at owncloud.com/jive, or take a look at, or send an email over to jive@owncloud.com, and we'll be happy to follow up with you with any questions. Which then brings me to questions. Let me see if I need to just open up the question window here. And that's not helping. Trying to open the questions window. Let me just make it big enough so I can read it. Okie doke. Okay. In the chat? Okay, sorry, just looking for them in the chat. Productive. Right now, OwnCloud, of course, it'll work with Productive in as much as it will sync, OwnCloud will sync groups and content within groups, but it won't specifically, if Productive is working outside of the group structure and files are stored outside, it won't out of the box work with Productive. However, the extension to include things like the external file system and elements such as Productive and files in there would be a simple addition to the REST APIs that we have today. And if you'd like more information about it, we can follow up with you and discuss how you're using Productive and how file sync might work with the Productive extensions. Right now, we're limited to syncing groups. But we are looking at syncing spaces, although there's a debate whether or not syncing spaces makes sense given the performance hit often associated with spaces in Jive, and whether or not that would be a performance problem for folks. So I just got a question, what kind of platform do I need to install Jive on in my infrastructure? Um, Jive, now not we've installed Jive here. We have it running in a virtual machine on a single server for a small end set of test environments. Typically, it's a Java-based app, and in our case, we use Maven to do the build, and it's running in a single VM, but it's also only for testing. So from a production standpoint, you'd actually want to scale that significantly to do a Linux-based app server running Tomcat, and probably do a load balanced. The way Jive scales is that it scales by section. So depending on what parts of Jive you have installed, those elements are their own standalone servers, and they all intercommunicate. So it's one of the benefits of working with Jive in that it's a SaaS-based service that you can use that then gets productized to an on-site deployment capability once a year. So because of that, typically Jive is extremely scalable. Let's see. What kind of platform do I need to install Jive? Okay, got that one. Basic document management capabilities. So OwnCloud is essentially designed to, out of the box, to sync and share files, and what you can do is set permissions in OwnCloud for who can access what. So we have this element we call CRUDs. It's a create, read, update, delete, share. So every file or folder you share with other users of the system, you can set the privileges they have for accessing that content. So can the user that you're sharing it with create a new file in a folder? Can they create new folders? Can they read it, update a file or something in a folder? Can they delete stuff from it? Or can they share it with somebody else? And you can set all that when you share files or folders with another user. But a single user, if you want to use this to distribute, a single user syncing their own files is typically, since it's the user's files, and then think of it as a way to synchronize the files across platforms, privileges are the full privileges are granted because it's the user's files they're syncing with themselves. Let's see, audio fine. Any other questions come in? Just scrolling through here real quick. Okay. The other thing I've had asked questions about with Jive is this one on OwnCloud and Jive and the versions. And OwnCloud is running currently on Jive 6 and Jive 7. And it depends on the REST APIs. And in the future, we'll be adding external file system support, the new framework in Jive 7 that allows you to store files outside of Jive and still keep the same Jive functionality for those files. So as that's completed, we'll be adding that too. So you'll have your choice of where to put OwnCloud files, inside OwnCloud, inside Jive, or even inside a third-party location like, say, an NFS storage server.
Is it possible to customize branding? On both OwnCloud and Jive, theming is available. OwnCloud desktop and mobile clients can be branded, absolutely, and we offer that as an option. And the server-side branding is very simple, done by style sheets for OwnCloud. On the Jive side, Jive is absolutely themable and brandable. There was actually developer bar last week. If you guys know Jive, then you may know that their Jive World, their big show, was last week, and they had a theming bar where they would help folks theme things. And you can do very simple theming up to very complex theming of Jive as well, so that it's everything from looking like it's Jive with new colors to something that doesn't even look like it came from Jive at all in the first place. And it just depends on how much effort you want to go through to do it, but it is entirely possible. And the two together, you could create a single consistent feel across OwnCloud and Jive and the mobile apps so that it looked and felt like it was all one integrated experience. And if they wanted to brand each one individually, that's entirely possible. And we have customers on the OwnCloud side that do that today. Any other questions while we're here? So in OwnCloud, is there a delegated role for different administrators? So we have two levels of administrators in OwnCloud. typically a group administrator and an OwnCloud administrator. The group administrator administers groups inside OwnCloud, and the overall administrator is responsible for setting up OwnCloud and managing it overall. Because OwnCloud depends on, in large installations, it's recommended that OwnCloud use either a directory or a single sign-on of some kind, such as SAML or something else. The role of managing groups, managing access privileges is handled at that level. And then typically OwnCloud inherits them from those decisions. So it's not a standalone silo to manage. Typically it's part of an extended environment where those roles are already defined. And you can handle roles in OwnCloud at a basic level using groups to stand in for roles. And you can have groups for auditors, you can have groups for other folks, and when a file is shared, you can set the rights that those different groups might have. And let's see, another question popped up. High availability cluster. So with OwnCloud, the primary mechanism for us is OwnCloud is an N-tier web app. It's the easiest way to think about it. You have a load balancer out front. You'd probably have at least 2 app servers hosting PHP on Apache in most cases. And then you have a database for metadata storage, and then back-end storage connections, such as a connection to Jive. Typically, any HA associated with that is at the infrastructure level, so it's entirely up to you whether you want to do active-active or active-passive. The most important thing is that you want to sync the storage on the back end across multiple locations or multiple setups if you want to have an active-active. You can do synchronous writes. And you also want to sync the database. And as long as the database and the back-end file systems are synced between those 2 locations, then a user logging into one OwnCloud location wouldn't know the difference between that and the other OwnCloud location. But typically the high availability clustering is done in the infrastructure level, and OwnCloud rides on top of that. In part, that's what makes it so flexible, and the ability to install it in so many different locations and scenarios. All right, so with that, a couple other questions have popped up. And we do have a few. There was actually, and I'll point to, we had a presentation last week at Jive World with a customer of ours, and we certainly do have references in the data center at all sizes. And the question was about references in the data center. I'd be happy to provide them. I think the best thing to do is to reach out and connect, and then we can connect you with those references to have those conversations about OwnCloud scalability, about OwnCloud branding, and then have that conversation. Am I missing something in the chat window? Okay, just looking through here real quick for any other questions. Okay, it looks like I'll take 1 second. Anybody have other questions? I'd be happy to answer. Otherwise, we're at the half-an-hour mark, and looks like we've got good. All right, so we're at the half-hour mark. We got good questions, and we are going to stop the recording and wrap up the webinar. If you have any questions, feel free to email us, jive@owncloud.com. Reach out to us through our website, owncloud.com/jive. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you soon.